outside, wondering will mother...
Days before his death, Ozzy Osbourne made one last shocking move. He didn't just say goodbye. He wrote down everything he had spent decades hiding. His final memoir, Last Rites, isn't a victory lap, it's a confession. Inside, Ozzy reveals not just the truth about a 4-year affair that nearly destroyed his marriage, but the long trail of chaos that defined his life off stage. He admits that his addiction to turmoil went far beyond drugs or alcohol. It was baked into every choice he made, every relationship he jeopardized. What he reveals in this memoir is messy, raw, and brutally honest. And the most explosive part? He finished these confessions only days before he died. The final night in Birmingham. In early July 2025, the world witnessed what would be Ozzy Osbourne's final live performance. At 76 years old, riddled with pain from years of spinal surgeries, Parkinson's disease, and countless health scares, Ozzy had every reason to stay off the stage. But he wasn't going to leave quietly. The night was billed as his Back to the Beginning farewell show, held in Birmingham, the very city where his legendary career began with Black Sabbath decades ago. Fans flooded the venue, knowing this could be their last chance to see him perform. Security even had to expand the perimeter by 80 feet to manage the overflow crowd, with fans who couldn't get tickets camping outside just to hear his voice. When he stepped out, it wasn't the wild, unpredictable Ozzy of the 80s. His body moved slower, his voice cracked, but every note carried the weight of a lifetime of music history, and when his former Black Sabbath bandmates joined him for the opening riffs of Iron Man, the crowd erupted into what felt like both a celebration and a farewell. Little did anyone know that behind the scenes, Ozzy had already prepared his real goodbye, a memoir filled with secrets, regrets, and a truth he had no intention of taking to the grave. Last Rites, the memoir he refused to water down. Ozzy's final book, Last Rites, was completed just days before his death. Insiders say it's the most unfiltered account of his life ever written. No edits, no PR spin, just the raw voice of a man who knew the end was coming. Unlike previous biographies, Last Rites doesn't celebrate the rock and roll myth. Instead, it dissects it. He talks openly about every phase of his life, the rise to fame, the breakdowns, the health scares, the relapses, and most importantly, the relationships that nearly fell apart because of his own self-destruction. One of the recurring themes is his addiction to chaos. Even when I was clean, he writes, I found ways to blow up my life. He admits that his brain seemed wired for dysfunction, that moments of calm felt foreign and uncomfortable. It wasn't just the substances. He had an instinct to push things to the edge, whether that meant sabotaging his career or his marriage. And buried deep in those pages is a confession about his long pattern of infidelity, a trail of betrayals that culminated in his most infamous affair. Sharon, wife, manager, and survivor. Sharon Osbourne has always been more than just Ozzy's wife. She was his manager, his protector, and often the only person standing between him and complete ruin. When they married in 1982, Ozzy was considered nearly unmanageable. He was unpredictable, fueled by heavy drinking and drugs, and infamous for the chaos that followed him everywhere. Sharon took over his career, rebuilding him into one of the most successful solo acts in rock. She booked his tours, negotiated his contracts, and even physically pushed him on stage when he was too intoxicated to stand on his own. But their marriage was far from easy. It was marked by violent arguments, public scandals, and years of emotional strain. In one infamous late 1980s incident, Ozzy was arrested after a domestic altercation and forced into court-ordered rehab. Sharon stayed, but she later admitted that she had reached breaking points more times than she could count. Ozzy confesses in the memoir that he never made it easy for her. Beyond the addictions, there were affairs, fleeting, reckless, and almost always driven by his impulse to escape responsibility. Sharon knew about some of them, and she publicly revealed in interviews years later that she had uncovered multiple betrayals over the decades. But Michelle Pugh was different. The affair he couldn't bury. Between 2012 and 2016, Ozzy lived a double life. In Last Rites, he names Michelle Pugh, a celebrity hair colorist, as the woman who nearly ended his marriage for good. Unlike the meaningless encounters of his past, this relationship lasted 4 years and carried emotional weight. He admits that being with Michelle felt like an escape. She wasn't just a fling, she made him feel normal, like he could breathe without the pressures of fame. He describes sneaking away to see her, booking hotel rooms under fake names, and lying to himself that it wasn't serious because he never planned to leave Sharon. But the truth caught up with him. In 2016, Sharon discovered emails and receipts that exposed everything. Her reaction wasn't loud or dramatic, she simply left. According to friends, she packed a bag, walked out, and didn't contact him for weeks. Ozzy writes that those weeks were the darkest of his life. He didn't just lose Sharon's trust, he realized he had turned a lifetime of loyalty into ashes. A pattern of betrayal. Ozzy admits in Last Rites that Michelle wasn't the first. He writes, "There were others, too many to name, and none of them meant anything, but every one of them chipped away at what I had with Sharon." He describes these past affairs as moments of weakness, often fueled by substances, but just as often by his own restless nature. Sharon has spoken publicly about this pattern. In interviews from 2017, she admitted she had caught him multiple times over the years and even hired a private investigator at one point. She said, "I don't trust him as far as I can throw him, and I never will again." In the book, Ozzy doesn't try to justify these betrayals. He calls them cowardly, selfish, and the ugliest part of who I was. What made the Michelle Pugh affair so damaging wasn't just that it lasted years, it was that it happened during a time when he was supposedly sober and stable. The fallout from Michelle's discovery was brutal. Sharon left, his management team fractured, and the tabloids exploded with coverage of the affair. Friends staged an intervention, urging him to get help, not just for substance abuse, but for his destructive behavior patterns. Ozzy entered a private therapy program that focused on accountability and impulse control. It wasn't about blaming fame or addiction. It was about facing the truth of why he kept sabotaging his own life. One session left him shaken. A therapist told him, "You don't know how to live without crisis. You create it because it's all you know." Ozzy writes that those words hit him harder than any diagnosis he had ever received. The turning point came during a joint therapy session with Sharon. For the first time in decades, he broke down completely. There were no excuses, no rock star attitude, just a man who realized he might have lost everything. Sharon listened, but she didn't offer comfort. She left the session without making any promises. Conditional forgiveness. By mid-2016, the two began appearing together again, but this wasn't a clean reconciliation. Sharon set strict rules, full transparency, continued therapy, and complete control over his professional life. Ozzy didn't fight it. He writes that he accepted these conditions because he knew he had no right to negotiate. Their home became quieter, meals were tense, conversations brief. Even the family pets sensed the tension. Slowly, cracks of normalcy returned, family dinners, short tours, public appearances together, but the emotional closeness was never the same. Ozzy admits that this period wasn't about love or romance. It was about survival and proving he could be trusted again, even if the damage could never be fully undone. The memoir that exposed it all. When Last Rites was announced, fans expected a look back at his music career. Instead, the book laid bare every secret, addictions, betrayals, and the price of fame. Sharon and their children reportedly read the manuscript before his death, but none of them publicly endorsed it. Insiders say it reopened old wounds and sparked private family disagreements. Kelly and Jack stayed silent, while Sharon avoided interviews altogether. Fans were split. Some praised Ozzy's honesty, calling it the ultimate act of redemption. Others felt the memoir was too raw, that it dragged up pain that should have been left buried. But Ozzy's wish was clear. He wanted the world to know the full, unfiltered truth before he was gone. Legacy without makeup. Ozzy's final act wasn't a perfectly choreographed farewell tour, it was a confession. He doesn't paint himself as a hero in Last Rites. Instead, he owns up to every mistake, every broken promise, every act of self-destruction that defined his life. He knew that legends don't always leave clean legacies. They leave stories, scars, and truths that make them unforgettable. And Ozzy, in all his chaos, wouldn't have it any other way. So, what do you think about Ozzy's last confession? Was it an act of courage, or was it just his way of controlling the story one last time? Let me know in the comments. And if you think Ozzy's story was wild, wait until you hear the final days of another rock legend. We've got that coming next.